getting close. Okay. So, end of class for the midterm, we mentioned briefly the election of 1800. We said, okay, Thomas Jefferson wins, right? Thomas Jefferson becomes president. Aaron Burr becomes the vice president. So, in this election, the election of 1800, the Federalists lost the executive branch and also lost the majority in Congress. In other words, the Federalists, who for the first 12 years of the country were running the place, basically, and who equated their political survival with survival of the nation, are out. 2 out of 3 branches of government. And so, for now, like, after the election, for a very short time, they are still, they still have their day job. And so they decide that they need to do something to make sure that Federalists keep control of the 3rd branch of government, the judicial branch. So, to that end, they came up with a plan that goes down in history as the Midnight Appointments. So first, a little background, context, what leads into this. And I know some of you have heard this before, but, so, Congress passes the Judiciary Act of 1801. So, this created 16 circuit courts with a new judge for each, which, as you might guess, we're going to have the Federalists. They also increased the number of attorneys, clerks, and marshals. Before he left office, John Adams named John Marshall the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. John Marshall, hardcore Federalist. He was involved in, writing the Federalist Papers during ratification of the Constitution. So, there's a whole bunch of new positions to fill. John Adams appoints Federalists to all of them. This included, but was not limited to, 42 justices of the peace for the newly created District of Columbia. So, these are called midnight appointments. They give the nickname midnight appointments because while they are perfectly legal, totally legit, they happen after John Adams knows he's gonna, very soon gonna be out of a day job, and all these members of Congress know that they're almost out of a day job. So midnight in this context meaning sort of like, last minute, late at night, or right before the next administration took over. This kind of thing is what it's referring to. Problem for these guys, for the Federalists, this happens so close to the switch in government that they don't have time to get all the paperwork done. In some cases, yes, like folks like John Marshall, they're good to go. But a lot of these justices of the peace, particularly for the District of Columbia, they're still waiting on their commissions. The official paperwork signed by the president that said, here's your commission, you are a justice of the peace, just like we said. New administration comes in. James Madison is the new Secretary of State. He sits down at his desk. He sees a gigantic pile of papers. He's like, what the heck is that? So he starts looking through it, and he realizes quite quickly that these are the commissions for these justices of the peace. They are waiting to be mailed out. So Madison's like, huh, that's kind of weird. What the heck do I do with this? Do I go ahead and mail them out? It's for the opposition political party. Or what do I do? So he goes to ask the president, Thomas Jefferson. It's like, Jefferson, what the heck do I do with this? Jefferson says, don't mail them out. They're all Federalists. These guys are all Federalists. Do not mail those commissions. Well, a number of these guys were already aware that the commission was coming, so they're just waiting for it to arrive in the mail. Never comes. They're disappointed, mad, angry, frustrated, whatever. One guy in particular, William Marbury, as in this Marbury, William Marbury is mad enough that he sues. He sues the government and says basically, yo, you owe me my commission, it's legit, cough it up. So, this case, and he sues, as you can tell, he sues James Madison. Because James Madison is the one who is not distributing them. So he goes after James Madison. So, anybody know off the top of their heads why Marbury versus Madison is important? Like, what's the most important piece of this? It's a game changer. Anybody? You guys familiar with the concept of judicial review? This is where we get that. It is this decision, Marbury versus Madison, where the Supreme Court basically says, hey, it's our job to review legislation and determine whether or not it is constitutional. That's our job. So up until 1803, it wasn't their job. So, but it becomes their job. Okay, so filling in the details. John Marshall, so this case goes before the Supreme Court, right? John Marshall, a Federalist, brand new in his job, he's treading a fine line. He does not want to antagonize Mr. Jefferson, but he recognizes that these commissions are perfectly legit. So he's like, oh man, I'm in a tight spot here, what do I do? He comes up with a solution. He reviews his copy of the Constitution, goes back and looks at a law we mentioned earlier, the Judiciary Act of 1789, and I mentioned to you that you should remember that because a key term would be tied to it. Well, it's this key term that's tied to it. So, Section 13 of the Judiciary Act of 1789 gave the court jurisdiction in mandamus proceedings. Constitution didn't do that, but the Judiciary Act of 1789 did. And so these are, what Marbury is asking for is a writ of mandamus, basically a document saying, dear James Madison, you are required to turn over that document, and if you don't, we're going to break your face. So, therefore, it is a mandamus proceeding. So, what Marshall does is, he's comparing it, and he goes, hey, wait a minute. Writs of mandamus, not mentioned as part of our deal, doesn't belong to the Supreme Court, according to the U.S. Constitution. So, therefore, he declares that Section 13 of the Judiciary Act of 1798 is unconstitutional. And he knows, Marshall's telling me, he's like, look, Constitution says that the Supreme Court has original jurisdiction only in cases involving ambassadors or states. Beyond that, we don't have any say. We can't, we have no pull, we have no say. We can't issue any kind of an order in this case. He does, by the way, at the same time, he tells Marbury, he's like, look, I feel your pain, man. The commission totally should be yours. You have a legit right to it. Everything was on the up and up. Everything about it was perfectly legal. You should have it. Madison is indeed being a stinker, he says, but I can't do anything about it. The Supreme Court cannot help you in this matter. So, in taking this approach, James Madison has rather delicately, politely, slapped Thomas Jefferson on the wrist and said basically, naughty, 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 Tommy, you're a bad boy. Without doing it so much that he gets in trouble. He definitely does not want to run afoul of the new president. Please be careful. Goodness. While at the same time, establishing, judicial review. And William Marbury is out of luck, as are so many others who were expecting those commissions that never showed up. Fun fact, Thomas Jefferson, the first president to be inaugurated in the new federal city of Washington, in the District of Columbia. And of course, after that, it's always going to be that, right? Before that, people were inaugurated in different places. Okay. Do you guys remember, just in a week now, remember one of the controversies over at Alexander Hamilton's proposals on the public credit? Thomas Jefferson says, it might be cool to have a national bank, it might be handy, but I don't think it's necessary. Thomas Jefferson is kind of getting stuck on the necessary and proper clause in the Constitution. So, in other words, what I'm telling you basically is that Thomas Jefferson was what they call a strict constructionist, as in he interpreted the Constitution very, very, very narrowly according to the actual words in it. He's not doing any kind of reading between the lines, whatever, until opportunity presents itself, and he suddenly shifts position. Louisiana Purchase, class, 1808, is this moment. So, Louisiana, in this case it does not mean the state, right? It means the entire Mississippi River Valley. So it's huge. It's absolutely freaking massive. And it had originally been settled by the French. We talked about that, right? We talked about LaSalle. End of the French-Indian War. France cedes it to Spain. Right? We mentioned that also. But France was never really happy about that. France felt some serious regret. Wanted that chunk of land back. So, in the year 1800, Napoleon secured its return in exchange for a promise that he would set up a Spanish princess and her husband in Italy as rulers of an enlarged Tuscany. So, class, is Napoleon the kind of fella whose word you can take to the bank?
No.
Not so much, right? Not his best skill. So he makes this promise, and Spain goes, okay, Napoleon, we're cool with that. We like that. We're willing to trade. Napoleon gets the chunk of land that would later be known in U.S. history as the Louisiana Purchase. He gets that land back from Spain, and does not fulfill his part of the bargain. So, yeah, screws Spain over, basically is what he does. But at this, like right around the same time, where things are happening fast, but Napoleon runs into a major problem. Much of his forces are wiped out by, like, I think it's yellow fever, a combination of yellow fever and, storms at sea. His navy's getting creamed by Mother Nature, and yellow fever is wiping out his dudes. So what happens is he has a much reduced military force, and he goes, when I first started negotiations for this chunk of real estate, it seemed like a wonderful idea, but now he's going, I need money far more than I need land, because I need to get more dudes, more ships. The man is desperate, so he needs cash. Meanwhile, Thomas Jefferson has heard about the land transfer from Spain to France, and he completely freaked out. Dude has a coronary. Why is he freaking out? It might seem weird, since Jefferson loves all things France, right? It might seem weird for him to freak out over the concept of having France as a next door neighbor. But here's what he's worried about. He's worried that France will proceed to shut down the Mississippi River as far as like U.S. commerce along it. He's afraid that Napoleon's going to throw up a whole bunch of closed signs. So remember, the U.S., and we talked about this last time, the Treaty of San Lorenzo, right? Also known as Peace Treaty. The U.S. gets the right from Spain to, use the Mississippi River for commerce. Well, now Thomas Jefferson's going, oh crap. If France shuts this down, we're going to be in a whole lot of trouble. All of our dudes in the West are going to have to haul their stuff clear the heck over here to the Atlantic coast. That's going to be expensive. People are going to lose their shirts. He is really, really, really concerned. So, another piece of this is he was worried that French possession of the city of New Orleans would force the U.S. back into the arms of Great Britain. So, he does not like Great Britain, and he's going, hey guys, remember that whole war thing we fought to get away from Great Britain? I don't want to be put in a position where I have to be buddy-buddies with Britain again. He doesn't want the U.S. to go crawling back to Britain saying, hi, can we, develop an economic arrangement here? So, he doesn't want it. Doesn't want it to happen. So, what does he do? He sends Robert Livingston, who is the new Minister of France, to Paris to have a nice little chit-chat with Charles Talleyrand, France's minister, the main diplomat, right? You may remember him from a week ago, the XYZ affair. So, Livingston goes to Paris. Unlike the three U.S. diplomats who he wouldn't talk to, Talleyrand actually talks to this guy. And so, Robert Livingston basically has been authorized by Jefferson to try to negotiate for a purchase of New Orleans and some of the surrounding territory. So Robert Livingston goes, and he's ready to, that's going to be his proposal. But he gets told, he shows up to the meeting, and Talleyrand just straight out says, hey dude, is the United States interested in buying all of Louisiana? This guy's going, I don't know, I think so, but I can't really do anything about that unless the president signs off on it. I gotta talk to Thomas Jefferson. So, he contacts Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson says, 2 thumbs up. There's a lot of controversy in the United States over this. A lot of people attacked Jefferson and said, dude, from day one, you have been a strict constructionist. You have been very, very, very strict in your interpretation of the Constitution. And nowhere in there does it say that the U.S. government can go around buying enormous chunks of real estate. I should move on to the Louisiana Purchase. So, this is what the US believes it is buying. Spain has a different view, more on that later. So, suddenly Thomas Jefferson's, a loose construction. Dude is reading between the lines. He's like, oh, it's totally in there, man. It's an implied power. It's in there. So it's totally legit for me to do this. So, Robert Livingston goes through with the real estate transaction class and pays $15 million for the land you see, mostly green, but some, whatever that is, purple maybe, at the bottom, whatever color we want to call that. But the Louisiana Purchase, as you can tell from that, essentially doubled the size of the United States. So, it ends up being something like 3.5 cents per acre, per square acre. Well, it's a pretty good bargain shopping, even then, and obviously much more today. But, so, this ends up, so the guy gets a lot of grief for it. People are like, what the heck are you doing, Thomas Jefferson? But in the end, this little episode, the purchase of Louisiana Territory, goes down in history as like the high point of Jefferson's administration. Everything else for Thomas Jefferson goes rather poorly after that. So this is the high point. One of the weird pieces of this, like because these things are happening so fast, just boom, boom, boom. December 20th, 1803, American officials took formal possession of Louisiana from a French agent who had taken over from Spanish authorities 3 weeks earlier. So those, different national flags are going up and down in New Orleans. Spain, then France for 3 weeks, and then the US. So the problem, which I alluded to earlier, is the United States and Spain disagreed on where the western boundary of the land parcel was. Spain says that the border was 100 miles west of the Mississippi River. The Americans are like, no, it's not. It's the crest of the Rocky Mountains. What you are seeing here, at least the upper part here, crest of the Rocky Mountains. So they're making that argument. Spain, this is rough, right? But Spain is basically saying, no guys, all this stuff is still ours, but you guys get this piece here. And so, major difference of opinion over where the heck the western boundary is. It's an 800-mile difference in terms of, like, not talking square miles, but 800 miles between where Spain says the boundary is and where the United States and France say the boundary is. France is like, no man, that's what you gave us, Spain. That's what we sold to the US. Spain's like, nope, that's not it. So, this is going to be a lingering problem for the next 16 years before it is resolved. So we will see people run into this challenge as we move forward. Let us move on to the Lewis and Clark expedition. Painting of Meriwether Lewis. So, he is an army guy. He's also Thomas Jefferson's secretary. So he tells him, okay, so June 20th, notice if you will the dates. This is when all the wheeling and dealing is going on, but before the US actually possesses the Louisiana Territory. Thomas Jefferson sends this dude a letter. And he says, okay, I'm going to read you part of the letter, class. What I would like you to do is listen and tell me afterwards what it is that Thomas Jefferson is after. What, in other words, is this guy's original homework assignment? So, he says, to Meriwether Lewis, blah, 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 blah. The object of your mission is to explore the Missouri River and such principal streams of it as by its course and communication with the waters of the Pacific Ocean, whether the Columbia, Oregon, Colorado, or any other river, may offer the most direct and practicable water communication across this continent for the purpose of commerce. Okay, so the dude is rather wordy, right? We could simplify his sentence greatly if we were writing it, but you catch like, if you boil it down, what's this dude saying?
To find a good trade route.
Yeah. What direction does he envision it going?
The Pacific.
Okay, yeah. So, Jefferson, let's see, where's my marker? Jefferson, of course, very much aware of the Mississippi River. This is not going well. Very much aware of this. What he's hoping is that there's some kind of water route that goes like that, basically. Something. And he's like, you know, we may have to switch back and forth between rivers. Basically, he's like, I need you, dude, to go find out if there's a practical water route from here to the Pacific so that we can, you know, engage in commerce. He's thinking it'll save a lot of time, right? Save on transportation costs, make things cheaper. G-class, how'd that part of the expedition work out for Jefferson?
Good.
So,
Good.
not particularly. No such water route exists. So, he eventually gets that news and goes, you know, ah, dang it. But, so he gets, Meriwether Lewis gets the first letter, and then, you know, he's told, you need to take tough frontiersmen with you. So go ahead and take William Clark. So, Meriwether Lewis, William Clark are the two co-leaders of the Lewis and Clark expedition. They have a bunch of people with them, other people going on this expedition. Okay. So, a couple of maps of the expedition. Let's go with this one. They leave St. Louis, as you can see here. They go up, and originally they go over here, and they make it to the mouth of the Columbia River. They establish Fort Clatsop, and they spend the winter there. On the way, okay, so you can see this map shows you where the Mandan villages are. They go up to the Mandan villages, they're hanging out. These are friendly folks. And while they're there, they encounter a Shoshone woman named, wait, she's shining. Most people pronounce it Sacagawea. The natives would have pronounced it Sacagawea. So sometimes you'll hear modern historians say Sacagawea. They're trying to pronounce it correctly, the way the natives would. But they run into her. She's got a husband and a small baby. They hire her, you know, well, they're telling the man that, but like, here's what we're up to, this is our plan. And she's like, hey, you know, I know that area really, really well. Go over far enough that way and you'll hit my homeland. So he's like, okay, you're hired, you'll be our guide. So they pick up Sacagawea and she becomes the guide of the expedition. A couple other pieces, okay, so we know what Thomas Jefferson's original plan was, original goal. A couple other important things that that become part of their expedition by the time they leave St. Louis. Thomas Jefferson, very interested in science. So he tells them, while you're out there, he's like, I wanna know what's out there. I need to know what's out there. I need you to collect any plant and animal specimens that are unfamiliar. Anything that we haven't seen yet. Collect them, bring them home to me, let me see them. We'll learn about them. He also tells them, whatever you do run into, draw maps. Take very careful, draw very careful maps. Rivers, mountains, whatever, we wanna figure out just what the heck is out there. Also, this is intended to be in part a goodwill tour. So these guys bring tons and tons and tons of trinkets with them. And the idea is, and they do this, they stop, particularly as they're going up the Missouri River, they stop every time they see a new tribe of Native Americans. They stop, they exchange, they give them gifts, and they say basically, hi, we're the new folks who own this area. You guys now fall under our government. Guy in charge is a little fellow named Thomas Jefferson. You'll love him, you'll like the guy, he's swell. This kind of thing, just introducing them to the concept of, Spain is no longer in charge here, and by the way, neither is France. We are. But it's intended to, start things off on the right foot. Positive, warm relations between natives and these explorers and the nation at large. Okay, so that's the plan. So they go up, they spend the winter, then they split up on the way back, because they figured they'll cover more territory. So one group comes down here, goes along the Yellowstone River, and goes up like that, and you can see they connect. This group up here goes along, goes up to the loops up around the Marias River, and keeps on going. The problem they run into here, they run into Blackfeet Indians. Shooting match breaks out. A couple of Blackfeet Indians are killed. A couple of Lewis and Clark's men injured. But these guys go, once this goes down, these guys are going, oh my gosh, this is a major oopsie. We gotta get the heck out of here, we gotta get the heck out of here right now. So, they make a beeline out of that area, get the heck out. So, why do I mention this? Because they have accidentally set the stage for future poor relations between Blackfeet Indians and Americans. Down the road, okay, so U.S. explorers are going to avoid Blackfeet Indians as much as possible, go around them, not through their territory. And, by the 1820s, there's fur traders from Britain all over the area, and there's fur traders from America all over the area. And the Blackfeet Indians become allies with the British fur traders, because they're like, we hate you guys, you Americans, you suck, and so we're gonna be pals with the British. And so there are future skirmishes, fights between U.S. citizens and the Blackfeet Indians because of what happened here. That's a bad precedent. Okay, so one of the reasons, well, I guess the reason probably that the Lewis and Clark expedition is so famous is, one, it's considered a huge success, despite the fact that they did not find this non-existent water rattle. Still considered a huge success. They return to St. Louis. They bring their maps and their specimens and journals. They took, they kept, a billion pages of journal notes. So, and we have those journals, so, one of the things that plays into this is, historians have a day-by-day record of where they went, what they did, who they saw, just everything. They're really detailed journals. Okay. So, there are a couple of other expeditions that you and I are interested in. So Lewis and Clark being numero uno. Number 2 is the Freeman Custis Expedition, also known as the Red River Expedition. So, Freeman Custis Expedition. These guys are supposed to go up the Red River, which you might guess based on the fact that the other name is Red River Expedition, right? Class, where is the Red River located?
Isn't it right above us?
Can you be more, yes, but can you be more specific?
Isn't it the river that defines Oklahoma and Texas, or is it a different river?
Yes, so, that is where Freeman and Custis are supposed to lead their people up. But if we go back to, like, if we look at this for a second, Louisiana Purchase, and think in terms of, okay, what's Spain saying, where the boundary is, and where, you know, what the US is saying. So these guys are supposed to go up here, right? But notice how close it is to that line, and then you add in, for starters, then you add in the fact that Spain's like, no, and boundaries like that. So, right off the bat, these guys end up going into, they encounter a bunch of Spanish officers, soldiers, get sort of entangled with them. It's messy, the expedition is expensive, creates major diplomatic problems. The Spaniards are like, no, we're not budging, man, we're not budging. So, the Freeman Custis expedition doesn't go particularly well. There's a lot of stuff going on in it, a lot of stuff surrounding it. Okay, so you look at this one, you're going, gee, I don't know, that doesn't, to me, that doesn't look like the boundary between Texas and Oklahoma, right? You look at this one, like, oh, okay, that looks much better, maybe not perfect, but it's much better looking, as far as like, you know, something people can recognize. Okay, so, Red River Expedition, also the Freeman Custis Expedition, the first major scientific probe into the American West, that was to be led by civilian scientists and include an academically trained naturalist. It is considered to be the southern counterpart to the Lewis and Clark expedition. So, in other words, Jefferson is saying, Lewis and Clark, you all go north, go up high, go north, and we saw this on the map, right? Figure out what's there in Louisiana Purchase. This is Freeman and Custis. I'm gonna send y'all south, but I'd like you to basically figure out the same stuff, with the exception of the whole water route part. But he's like, get samples of stuff, tell me what's out there, draw mountains, draw rivers. But no, he's like, explore, tell me what the heck we've just purchased. Yeah, it does not go well, at all. So, class, we're busy people. So, this will lead you, as you might be able to tell, online handbook. It's basically a Texas history encyclopedia. Which file up there? No. Okay. Texas history encyclopedia. So what I would like you to do is make a note of this URL. And so if you go here, you will find essentially an encyclopedia entry for the Red River Expedition, and it will tell you everything you ever wanted to know about the Red River Expedition and more for the purposes of final exam questions. I'm just a few seconds early. Expedition number 3. Zebulon Pike. So, this guy goes on 2 expeditions. We will touch briefly on the first and spend some quality time with the second. So, he was sent out in the year 1805 to find the headwaters of the Mississippi River. Dude is supposed to find the source. Now, these guys have been up and down the Mississippi River for a zillion years now, and they're going, okay, but what the heck is the ultimate source? Where does it begin? He's supposed to find this out. So he goes, follows it up, goes up in that area where, a bunch of tributaries are coming together. He finds one tributary and announces, he goes this way, he's like, sweet, I found it. Went back, told everybody he found the headwaters of the Mississippi River. And of course, he's, making maps the whole time, so he's got that. Later discoveries, later generations of explorers, showed that he made a mistake and picked picked a tributary, but not the main part of the Mississippi River, not the main thing where it begins. So, he says he found it, he didn't. Didn't learn that for quite some time, till later explorers went. But like I say, you and I are more interested, especially for examination purposes, in his second expedition. One of the things that makes it distinctive is the first 3 expeditions we talked about, it's all about Thomas Jefferson saying, hey, you guys need to explore this, this, and this. Now it changes. He's gonna go on another expedition, but people behind it change. This time, General James Wilkinson, who was the commander of the Western Department, translation, he's a military officer, U.S. military officer in charge of the Louisiana Purchase. Like everything they purchased in that real estate transaction. He asks Pike to go on an expedition. And he's kind of looking for somebody who can do what the Red River expedition did not. So he tells this guy, I want you to go out and check out, the southern part of the Louisiana Purchase. Tell us what we have there, do some exploring, etc., etc. He says, okay. So, instead of following the Red River, Pike goes a little further north, gives himself a little bit of a buffer between Spain and what, the U.S. is arguing is part of their territory. So he goes up the Arkansas River into Colorado. He explores the Rocky Mountains. This map is not perfectly accurate, but it gives you a general feel for what he did. So he cruises out. He makes it to Pikes Peak and surrounding area in Colorado. Random factoid, Pikes Peak, as you might guess, is named after him, but he never climbed it. It's the tallest mountain in that region. So when it came time to name things, the U.S. government named it Pikes Peak. He did climb a much, much, much shorter peak nearby, but he did not go up the tall one. At any rate, he's cruising out there, and after he follows Pikes Peak, he figures his next project should be to find the headwaters of the Red River. Dude wants to find the headwaters of the Red River. In other words, picking up on the Freeman Custis expedition, trying to complete that for them. So he goes south, looking for the headwaters of the Red River. Anybody want to guess what happened to Mr. Pike and company?
Died.
No? Who might they run into if they're headed south? Spaniards, Spanish soldiers. So, Mr. Pike gets arrested by Spanish soldiers, as do, the members of this expedition. he is accused of being a spy. They said, look, you're an American, you're on, Spanish soil, you are spying for the Americans. He's like, no, I'm not. I'm just scoping the place out, seeing what it is we got in the Louisiana Purchase. And of course, this issue of, where's that western boundary? That is front and center here because, he's saying, guys, I'm on US soil. And they're like, nope, sorry, no Spanish soil, and we're gonna have to put you in jail. So he ends up, he and his buddies, as you can kind of tell from this rough map, he ends up in jail. Eventually, he and his buddies are freed, and as you can tell, they make a beeline to get the heck out of there. And they escape. Okay, so the question is then, why do we care about Zebulon Pike, particularly this expedition? Basically two reasons, class. Reason number one, when he gets home, he writes up a report, right, about what he saw. And his report gives Americans their first overall picture of what's out there on the Great Plains and in at least one small portion of the Rockies. So he's adding to US knowledge of geography, right? He's giving them information, giving the country information about what exactly is out there. Now is a big part of his assignment, right? Go gather info, tell us what the heck's out there. So he does that. Part two, he creates a map. And on his map, so he's not the best drawer of maps, but he tries. He draws a map, and he says that, okay, on his map, he labels, so this area here, he labels this whole thing, and you'll notice, he doesn't even go up here, right? But that doesn't slow him down. He labels this whole area as the Great American Desert. That's what he writes, the Great American Desert. And he tells people, humans cannot inhabit this area. Can't be done. In order to make that claim, naturally he has to ignore the fact that there are natives on the land and also Spaniards on the land. But he does, for the purposes of his map, he ignores the fact that there are already people living on the land. But what that does is this idea, this concept, erroneous though it is, gets embedded into the minds of the general public. This thing, his map and his error essentially go viral. And so the American public in general and political leaders and everybody buy into what he's saying. So, Zebulon Pike and his map are going to pop up 2 or 3 times over the next couple of decades. And right up until the Civil War, basically, because his error, it changes settlement patterns, and it actually, believe it or not, changes the road to the Civil War. It plays a role in that and how it played out. So we will have reason to return again and again to Zebulon Pike's Great American Desert concept. So, in the U.S. history class, his map, very influential, very important, changes the course of history. So you really want to know that. Okay. Remember when we were talking about the Whiskey Rebellion and I said these guys were considering seceding from the Union? Well, these guys also considered seceding from the Union. Okay, so fun fact though, these two guys belong to different political parties. This guy is a Federalist. This guy is a Democratic Republican. So, but they get together on this project. Here's how this plays out, class. Federalists, living, you know, their main base is New England, that's where you find most of them. They're very uncomfortable with US westward expansion. Because they're going, you know, they're looking at the map of North America and they're going, man, if you guys go all the way over, we're gonna end up, you know, the Federalists are gonna end up in this little tiny tail of the United States. And we won't, you know, all these other areas gonna be the dogs, we're gonna be the tail. And they're worried about power. They're worried about power, influence, and they're going, we oppose now, we don't like that. So, they call a meeting, a bunch of these folks do. And so, most of these folks in attendance are Massachusetts Federalists, and they call a meeting, they call themselves the Essex Junto. They call a meeting to discuss what kind of demands they might have, like their vision for the United States versus what's currently happening, and they are considering seceding from the Union and making their own dang country that better fits with what their view is. Okay, however, they figure the only way to be, practically, they said, they're like, if we look at this pragmatically, the only way to pull this off is if we get New York on board. We have to have the state of New York with us, or, you know, we're too small, whatever, this isn't gonna fly. So the plan, these guys go to this guy and say, hey, Aaron, we know you're of the wrong political party, but you want power, you're a seriously power-hungry dude. How would you like to run for election as governor of New York, become the governor of New York, and then join with us in leading the Union, assuming our demands are not met? He's going, well, you know, I am pretty darn bored being the vice president of the United States. I sit at my desk and I make paper airplanes. So, that was the plan. First snag, Mr. Burr loses the election. So he does not become governor of New York. So, meanwhile, Alexander Hamilton, he's a hardcore Federalist, right? Not happy with Timothy Pickering or the other Federalists who are doing this. He also does not like Aaron Burr at all. So, he makes a comment. And, you know, if you've seen Hamilton, you will encounter this, but, man says, Aaron Burr is a dangerous man and one who ought not to be trusted with the reins of government. Well, this ends up going into the local newspaper. It gets published. It's obviously circulated, right? So Aaron Burr catches wind of this. Aaron Burr is deeply, deeply offended. Absolutely horrified. So, Burr is so offended that he challenges Hamilton to a duel. Fun fact, that's an illegal act. It was illegal to challenge someone to a duel. Burr did it anyway. So they met at Weehawken, New Jersey on July 11th, 1804. Mr. Burr shot and killed Hamilton. It's a little bit weird, but Hamilton chose not to fire a shot, chose not to even attempt it. He just kind of stood there. Well, Mr. Burr had no reluctance about shooting Hamilton. Hamilton lingers for a day, he dies the next day. So, with this duel and the removal of Mr. Hamilton from the scene, it ended the plans of the Essex Junto. It also ruined Mr. Burr's political career, whatever was left of it. Also, one of the ironies here is this guy and others are really, really, really worried about political power of the Federalists. So they put this plan in motion, class, that ends up you know, this is just kind of the way things played out. But it ends up with the removal of Mr. Hamilton from the scene. He was the most powerful Federalist around. So with his removal, the Federalist Party becomes much weaker. Timothy Pickering's probably sitting at home going, should never have gotten with the political opposition. Aaron Burr tried to do something. Cause yeah, he's like, let's make the Federalist stronger, end result, makes it weaker. With this guy gone. So, Burr is indicted for murder in New Jersey, because that's where the duel took place. He is also indicted in New York, because that's where he was when he issued the duel challenge, where he challenged Hamilton to a duel. So, 2 states, 2 broken laws, and he's got people coming after him. So, and you know, people are very upset about the whole murder thing, right? They get crazy about that. So, Burr says, oh man, this would be a lovely time to take a vacation. So he leaves. He gets the heck out of there. He goes to Spanish-held Florida. I need a Florida vacation. So he goes down there, hangs out until November. November 1804, Aaron Burr says, ah, crap. I gotta go take up my day job. Congress is back in session. I'm the vice president. I gotta go take up my post. So he comes back. He has to be very careful where he goes. He can't set foot in New York or New Jersey, or he's gonna get nailed for those crimes. As long as he stays out of those 2 states, he's okay. If the FBI had been around during this period, wouldn't have been so great for him. Okay, so that's the Essex Spoon Post. For now, let us stick with Mr. Burr. Mr. Burr is not done trying to acquire power. So, Burr conspiracy. At this point in time, the dude is no longer the vice president of the United States, and he knows, because of the killing of Hamilton, that his political career in the United States is over. However, the dude still wants power, wants to be in power. So, this is where General James Wilkinson steps in. Remember I said a moment ago, this is the guy who is the military officer in charge of all that land purchased in the Louisiana Purchase. So, Wilkinson comes to Burr and says, hey dude, I got a proposal. How about you and me get together, and he says, what I would like to do is carve off from the United States the entire Louisiana Purchase, and I'd like to make it its own dang country. You on board? And Burr's like, heck yeah, you don't have to tell me twice. I'm totally on board. So, they could call it Wilkinson conspiracy, but you know, it gets Burr's name instead, whatever. That's whatever we call it, the Burr conspiracy. So what happens is this, he goes on a recruiting drive. According to some history textbooks class, this guy recruited, quote, thousands of people willing to secede from the Union, break off from the United States, form their own country. So, if you are keeping score, class, this is the 3rd time in the young country's history where there's some group saying, hey, we need to break off, form our own country, do our own thing. I tend to think thousands is pretty optimistic. I think it's rather high. I don't think it was nearly that many. But General James Wilkinson goes home, spends his time chilling in front of the fire, and it gives him too much time to think. So he's thinking about plans, thinking about this, mulling it over, thinking about it again and again and again. Then he starts to worry. he gets scared, he says, man, what if I get caught? I could be tried for treason, I could be executed. He doesn't want to be tried for treason, he doesn't want to be executed. So, change of plan. He writes a letter to the President of the United States. It says, essentially, Dear Tommy, there is okay, this part is actually quoting from the real letter. He said, there is a deep, dark conspiracy afoot, end of quote, and you need to know about it. So he says, as I write this, Aaron Burr is out traveling the countryside, recruiting people to, break the Louisiana Purchase away from the Union. I think you should do something about that. Mails the letter. Thomas Jefferson gets the letter and goes, oh my gosh. He gets really, really, really angry, demands that somebody go track down Aaron Burr and arrest him. Well, so back in those days, when the Supreme Court was not in session, the Supreme Court justices would travel around the rural areas on their horses and serve as, local justices, small town judges, ruling over these rural areas, ruling not over the areas, but, over court cases that occur in those districts. It just so happened that when folks caught up with Aaron Burr and captured him, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Marshall, was in the neighborhood, cruising around on his horsey. So it is that Aaron Burr gets tried for treason in front of John Marshall. So, John Marshall tells the prosecutor, he says, look, in order to nail this guy for treason, we have to do, he says there's gotta be a couple things here. He says, we have to have somebody who is basically has witnessed him commit an overt act of treason and who is willing to testify in court. Okay, let's see, two, okay. There's a couple reasons, though, but basically two witnesses. So the judge says you gotta find two witnesses who will testify that he committed an overt act of treason. In the end, the prosecution was unable to pull that off. So they let him go. Aaron Burr walks. What that does, though, as far as like the U.S. court system, John Marshall's strict regulations make it, from that point forward in U.S. history, make it really, really, really tough to actually legitimately nail somebody for committing treason. Very, very tough to nail somebody for that. Okay. Okay, folks. Our next key term is the War of 1812. The War of 1812 is very long. So, rather than be in the middle of it, I think we should, this is a lovely stopping point.